You are listening to AccessUW, a podcast series brought to you by the University of Washington Office of the ADA Coordinator, where we highlight insightful discussions, informative interviews, and valuable insights about accessibility, equity, and inclusion, all within the realm of higher education with experts across the UW. In terms of accessibility, each podcast and a transcript are made available at the Office of the ADA Coordinator's website at www.washington.edu/ADA. Welcome back to another installation of AccessUW. This episode actually is closing out our final season, season 2. We couldn't think of better guests to have with us today. Today, we have some members of the libraries with us, especially those who are champions in accessibility and equity in the libraries. And we're going to be talking a little bit about how they improve accessibility and inclusion as a whole for all patrons, especially those with disabilities, and kind of talk a little bit about our Department of Justice rule on digital accessibility and how the libraries can be really a source of accessible e-textbooks and just accessible materials for faculty and for other members of our campus community. I'm here co-moderating today with our typical co-host, Bree Callahan, our ADA coordinator. Bree, would you like to say a little hello to our audience?
Hello, everybody out there listening. I'm excited to be with you again today. And as Toby mentioned, wrapping up our season 2. So excited to send you off to the summer with some good content.
Thanks, Bree. And I will now let our guests introduce ourselves. So we have 3 incredible guests with us today, Elliot, Kimanthi, and Hana from the University Libraries. I'm going to go one by one and have them introduce themselves, highlighting a little bit about their role and what their job entails, and maybe just about their relation to accessibility and why they do accessibility in the library specifically. Let's kick it off with Elliot.
Thanks, Toby. I'm Elliot Stevens. I use he, him pronouns. I'm an English Studies and Research Commons librarian at the University of Washington Seattle Libraries. And I'm also a current co-chair of our accessibility working group that we have in the library. And for me, I would say a lot of my interest before I started working in the library here at the UW, I knew very little about accessibility. So I've really loved being in the libraries because I feel like so much of what I know or what I've learned about accessibility has come through my workplace. And I really, I do a lot of work in the Research Commons and in the English department with digital stuff, digital accessibility. So I definitely am very interested in and think a lot about digital accessibility, whether it's a student making a digital book or a website or a podcast or a digital video. I'm just really interested in digital accessibility, or for all the things that students and teachers and researchers, for all the stuff that they use, databases and ebooks, digital maps, all those kinds of things, digital dashboards. I'm really curious about, is this stuff accessible? And if it's not, what are people doing to make it accessible?
Thanks for that introduction, Elliot. So happy to have you here. Let's hop to Hana. Would you like to give a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure, thanks. I'm Hana Leavy. My title is Collection Assessment Librarian here at the library. I have a few different roles here where really I'm kind of more on the back end, and I work with our vendors that provide a lot of the scholarly material that we subscribe to. So I help with decisions like, should we subscribe, should we not subscribe, what kind of metadata can we get to support these decisions. And a few years ago, one of the major considerations turned out to be accessibility of their products as well. So that was kind of a new focus for the libraries. I had to learn a lot to figure out how to answer these questions. So naturally flowed into joining the accessibility working group and really running from there. So I'm happy to be here and talk about what I've been working on.
Great. And last but not least, Kimanthi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kimanthi Warren. I am the Assistant Dean for Organizational Development and Inclusion. My work entails supporting organizational infrastructure development, training and development, as well as supporting our human resources team And from the perspective of accessibility, I work to advocate for inclusive excellence within our organization and building structures to support that throughout the work that we do. And so when I think about accessibility, I'm thinking about it from the perspective of creating access for everyone, thinking about the cultural impacts of accessibility, thinking about the actual tangibles for the resources. And so just really excited about the work that my organization has been doing, as well as looking forward to being a part of this podcast and talking through it a little bit more. And so just excited to be here.
Thank you, and thank you all. Such great guests we have today, and I'm very, very excited for this podcast. But let's jump into it. So Elliot, when you were giving your introduction, I heard you mention the accessibility working group, and it seems like that's an actual working group in the libraries that is working to operationalize and enhance accessibility. And I'm curious to hear kind of what is this working group and what influence does it have on shaping current practices at the UW libraries? So Elliot, I know you're a co-chair, but I actually want to hop this over to Hana as she was one of the first members of this group specifically.
Sure. Yeah, I can give a little history about our group. Back in 2017, the UW IT started their IT Accessibility Liaisons program, which was Cheryl Bergstaller at the beginning there. And that led to the libraries wondering what their role in all of this was as well. And at the same time, Washington State Policy 188, also known now as User 01, was starting to require a lot of accessibility for state institutions. So we knew we had to figure out as a university what we needed to do here. So the libraries created a new position for accessibility coordinator, which was filled in 2018. My position, the collection assessment librarian, also started in that same area. And one of my job description lines was, figure out this accessibility question with our subscription resources. So we have all these different areas to look at for accessibility, but in particular, these third-party resources that we subscribe to was a big question. So then the accessibility coordinator and I started at the same time. He formed the accessibility working group and he needed help. So he called for a co-chair for that group and I volunteered knowing nothing. So I knew I had to learn a lot and it was really a great experience. We formed several subcommittees, each of which were focused on doing actual work in different areas. So like one subgroup looked at our physical accessibilities, like looking at the actual library buildings and how those work for people. We had a training subcommittee who developed a bunch of like quick bite training modules. I think Elliot can talk more about those. And then also the e-resource testing, which is what I really focused on then and now. It's just been a lot. It's been a lot of work, but there's been a lot of great people to work with here at the university. So I don't know. That's the history. Elliot, did you want to talk more about the current state?
Yeah, so I think, I don't know, for anyone on campus who's wanting to set up an accessibility working group, I think you get to make choices about how it's organized and how it's led, and then how it's maybe kind of like what are the subcategories of it. So I think these are big questions that any unit or department or school or college, anything on campus, you could decide if you want an accessibility working group, how it's going to be put together. So we started out in the way that Hana described, with led by an accessibility coordinator. And then we have these subcommittees. And over the years, it's kind of morphed. Now we have two co-chairs. And so at any given time in our accessibility working group, we have two co-chairs. So I'm one of the co-chairs. Perry Yee, who is in our libraries and is an instructional designer, he's our other co-chair. He's getting ready to cycle off. So our co-chairs have 2-year kind of terms that we have. Because I think part of the idea is we do want to share leadership in accessibility in the UW libraries. And so I'll stick on as co-chair for another year, and then we'll bring someone else in and then another person in. So we want people to have the experience in our system of, taking ownership and having some leadership in the accessibility working group. And then we kind of found, though, that we wanted to change up kind of the way we're designed. And with Kimanthi, Perry and I have been meeting with Kimanthi this past year and talking about how can we maybe change the way we're organized and maybe change some of our charge for the accessibility working group. So one thing that came up early on when Perry and I were speaking with Kimanthi, for some reason we just got on the idea of buckets. Like if the accessibility working group, if we have buckets in it, like what are the buckets that make us who we are? And so we decided one bucket that we wanted to have for the accessibility working group is the subcommittees. And so we wanted to keep that kind of, we had subcommittees from early on, and we wanted to keep the subcommittees. And so we still have pretty much the same subcommittees. We have a subcommittee for communications. We have a subcommittee for the web, for the University of Washington Library web presence. We have a subcommittee for facilities. We have a subcommittee for training. We have a subcommittee for e-resource compliance. So we wanted to keep those. And we even checked in with the accessibility working group when we asked them, like, we don't have to have subcommittees still. Do you want to keep these? And everyone pretty much said, yes, like we like the subcommittees. Let's keep them. So we're keeping the subcommittees. Another bucket that we have, and this is a newish bucket, is speakers. And so in the accessibility working group, we have about three meetings every quarter, about a meeting a month. And one bucket every quarter is for the subcommittee. So our subcommittees check in. The other bucket is for a speaker. And so we find somebody, it could be a UW person, it could be someone outside the UW. We invite them to speak with us about something related to accessibility. And so our most recent speaker was Xander Andrews and Carol Ackerman from University of Washington DRS, Disability Resources for Students. And we had them speak about what happens at DRS, what does DRS do? And I think something that we're very interested in the UW libraries is how can the libraries work with DRS or collaborate with DRS or be a good partner with DRS? And so Xander and Carol talked about that, and that was a great speaker bucket. In the past, we've also had we had Jimmy McCollery from ProQuest. ProQuest is a big vendor that we get a lot of materials from in the library. And so Jimmy came to one of our accessibility working group meetings to talk about at ProQuest, how do they design for accessibility? How do they test for accessibility? When there are accessibility issues with their products, how do they fix those? So that was really interesting to see what they're doing there at ProQuest. And then we also had we had this past year the absolutely legendary Jane Burles Vincent from the University of Michigan. Jane Burles Vincent and a graduate student who works with her, Emily Selke, they came and they talked to us about VPATs, voluntary product accessibility templates. They talked about how at the University of Michigan, how they get VPATs and how they grade them. I think they have like an 8-point grading system for grading VPATs. And so they talked about that. So we have our subcommittee bucket, we have our speaker bucket, and then the other bucket that we have for our group, we call it the community of practice bucket. And that's where people in the accessibility working group or not in the accessibility working group. This is for anyone in the library, the UW libraries, anyone who's doing some kind of work with accessibility, they can present that work to the accessibility working group and get feedback on it. So that's our idea of a community of practice. It's a place where you show some kind of work that you're doing, some kind of practice that you have, and you get feedback. And so for those buckets, we had our web subcommittee. They've developed something. We have like an internal system that we have an internal web kind of thing at the University of Washington. We call it Staff Web. And in Staff Web, we have an accessibility portal. And the web subcommittee wanted some feedback on the accessibility portal, and how they could maybe revise it, especially with ADA Title II in mind. So we gave them feedback about that. Our ITS-DS department in the library has done some auditing of digital tools and websites and things, and they did a community of practice bucket where they showed us how they were auditing, and they wanted feedback about how they're auditing. So that was another thing that I think was very interesting for us in this ADA Title II moment. How do units or entities audit their digital platforms and tools and subscriptions? And then we also had a really great community of practice bucket with that Hana and the e-resource subcommittee. They also presented about auditing practices that they've had for when they are procuring digital resources. How do they how do they procure these things and audit these things and test these things and make sure that they are good things to have in our suite of, have it on the menu at the UW library. So I guess that's just all to say that, right now in the accessibility working group, we have these three buckets: the speaker bucket, the community practice bucket, and the subcommittee bucket. And for anyone on campus who wants to set up their own accessibility working group, I recommend it. I think those are good buckets to have, and it keeps things alive, interesting, and varied.
Thank you both for that explanation of kind of how the working group came to be and how you guys function as well today. To echo Elliot, I think that is a great example of how to model an accessibility working group. And I just want to give the biggest kudos to the libraries of course, you three, but also the folks who have been super involved with this as well too. Of when you were just talking about the subgroup involvement, I think that's so incredible to see how many folks are investing and wanting to be a part of accessibility work, even if they don't have the knowledge coming to it. And it seems like you all have created some great products from this as well, too, from trainings to this e-resource accessibility testing that we'll talk about in a little, all the way to web development and the physical accessibility of libraries. But I kind of want to transition and think of how some of these deliverables and things that you've created really aligns with the mission and just the overall initiatives of the libraries. Kimanthi, I'd love to shift to you. If you could talk a little bit more about some of the initiatives and some of the changes that the libraries have undergone to make its services more accessible to all and to all of its patrons that they serve.
I would love to. So excited. The library has undertaken a lot of initiatives to improve accessibility, both at the digital standpoint and also physical. I'll lean into the digital accessibility, and one of the initiatives we just launched and we're so excited about. We have launched our ADA Title II Accessibility Task Force. And this task force, the charge and purpose of this task force is to help us localize an implementation of the DOJ's Title II guidance. The team is tri-campus representing, so we have all three of our campuses reflected and represented in the team, and it's multifaceted engagement. So it includes leadership, it includes core stakeholders through our organization, all working towards a common goal of figuring out how we can best apply the guidance that has been provided by the DOJ. We are connecting to the university's initiative. So we have representation on our task force with members who are actually part of the university's action team, which allows us to have alignment with the larger mission. In addition to that, we are in the process now of identifying priorities so that we could have structure and be able to use our time well. We know that deadline is coming up. And so really wanting to be intentional about the way that we lean into this work is a big part of what the task force is framing. We have also other initiatives that are actively taking place on a regular basis, and we heard about a couple of them. The Accessibility Working Group is a phenomenal community of practice and engagement for our community. And Hana and some of the work that her team and others have been doing has been such a wealth of resource to move our mission forward as we prioritize accessibility within the libraries. Some of our actual physical initiatives have included implementation of height adjustment workstations. So being able to have workstations that adjust for those that need to have adjustable workstations, we do have that, as well as assistive technology tools and kits that we provide to the Tri-Campus organization. And that includes lap boards, high contrast, large type keyboards, and magnifier bars. And so a lot of tools that can really help with accessibility is something that we also have within our organization. Wheelchair charging stations. This is huge for those that really require mobility devices. Having the ability to charge their devices is key. And so we do have stations that support that within our tools of resource, and that's at various libraries. And so our libraries like the Odegaard Library, our Foster Business Library, Suzzalo Allen in the Commons space, like that's where we're seeing and implementing those resources. And so super excited about being able to continue our work with regards to promoting accessibility.
Thank you for some of those examples, Kimanthi. I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate all the work that you've done, not only in the digital space, but also the physical space as well, too. And as always, like in our show notes for most of the podcasts, we'll be linking to all the resources. So we'll highlight the accessibility working group. We'll highlight the accessibility resources that the libraries have and the beautiful web page that highlights all these incredible things that Kimanthi just highlighted. But I do want to focus a little bit more on the DOJ task force that you talked about as well. And I know that has kind of reshaped a lot of the accessibility work that we've been doing at the university in such a good way to make sure all of our digital materials are accessible. And I know that the libraries now coming into the 21st century is all really relying on digital spaces as well too. So I'm curious to hear from you, Kimanthi, of how have you seen the shift operate and kind of some of the outcomes that you were looking to see with this rule and how it's really pushing accessibility in a direction that it hasn't in the past.
Absolutely. This new guidance has significantly shaped the way that we think about digital accessibility, leaning into the task force and some of the work that the task force is doing as an implementation support for the libraries. It has been really helpful to have the additional compliance expectations really mapped out. It's clear. It allows us to understand what the Department of Justice is expecting of us. It helps us in our prioritization of work and effort, which is going to be a value add to the organization overall. And so being able to have that clear guidance helps us provide implementation support that the organization overall can really lean into. It allows us also, and it encourages to be data informed and data driven, being able to have that foundation and leaning into data and resources around data helps us be intentional in the way that we show up. And so very excited to have that. And I think having that guidance supports that work. The work guidance also really reinforces the need for structure and having timelines and milestones and defining roles and responsibilities as we think about this work. Overall, we consider this to be shared work, shared accountability. We each lean into it from a perspective of the work that we do. Accessibility is something that we all will be touching. But being able to have that structure, that guideline really allows us to be very, very wise and intentional with the resource and how we support the work. The DOJ also emphasizes a demonstration of good faith. We recognize this is work that we're doing now that will take time. And so being able to lean into resources and tools is something that we are exploring. And so some of the tools that we have been exploring include like Google Analytics, thinking about our resources and doing inventories of that. We heard about one of the audits that our RTSDS team has done. And so really thinking about how we can encourage similar types of efforts throughout our organization is something that we are also exploring as an aspect of the task force in the work that we're doing. Thinking about also inclusive, sustainable practices. It's not enough to just roll it out. We have to think about sustainability, and being able to continue the work long-term is something that we are looking into through efforts like communities of practice, through resource exploration and development, through partnerships, and trying to build relationships and have intentional conversations with our third-party vendors. That's all an aspect of sustainability and thinking about how we can sustain this work. We want it to be a lifetime of support for the communities that we serve. And lastly, the local implementation team. What is a real value in having that team and having so much diverse engagement is that we're able to hear the various perspectives. And that's how you really connect the work throughout the entire organization. Having leadership be reflected as well as staff and key stakeholders that do this work allows us to really have a holistic approach and lens to what our organization and our communities need.
Thank you so much for that response, Kimanthi. And I just want to, again, give kudos. I feel like when people think about a compliance deadline or about a new compliance guidance or things the like, it can be very daunting. And I love how you guys are taking this as an opportunity to do better and be better. And I know you guys have already done such incredible work, but really being like, this is allowing us to reshape our work and to live more closely to the university's mission and our missions as the libraries. So I just want to say thank you for those kudos of those points that you just highlighted. I know you guys are going to just constantly grow and be a greater resource for our community.
Toby, I want to jump in here and I mean, I'm gonna echo +1 all the kudos that Toby's already mentioned. I've worked with your group internally for a long time, and I've seen this over my 7 years as ADA coordinator. So this has consistently been happening. I'm curious how you're looking at the work we have locally to what's happening nationally with the peers. And I mean, any one of you can answer this question because I do feel like the UW is libraries is leading in some ways, but I'm sure you're also, looking at things that are happening nationally. So it's not just like something we're doing, we're applying practices or things that other people have tested, or at least benchmarking ourselves against our national libraries landscape. So I'm curious how you all have been using that as a resource to kind of look at how to incorporate what you've been looking at here internally into the work?
I can speak to that. This is Hannah. So, UW has recently joined the Big Ten, and they have really been a leader in accessibility. And when we first got started with the accessibility working group, we worked really closely with Michigan State in particular to see what they were doing and learned just so much from them. So, yeah, there's a lot of good resources there. The Big Ten also launched with some other groups, the Library Accessibility Alliance, which we are now also a member of. But that was also just a really great resource. So the Library Accessibility Alliance, they pay third-party contractors who do this accessibility testing regularly to do this assessment of library resources. We have a list of like highly used or niche resources that then these consultants will go through and really line by line look at all the accessibility of these things. So, and then any library can go to that website and look at these reports, and it really helps everybody make these choices. So that's a really great resource. I know it's library specific, but I know the Big Ten has other non-library resources as well.
No, thanks, Hannah. I know this work is nationally, right, being looked at across all of our peer groups. So I very much just appreciate how we're learning from each other, right? And leading in ways that we can, while also like following practices that are still being determined, right? This is a journey that we're all on together. Want to add something to that?
Sure, this is Elliot. I just wanted to add a little bit to what Hannah said, that certainly, I think another way that in the library we get a lot of great guidance at just the university level or the state level or the national level is you all, Bree, you've been to a whole bunch of our meetings in the accessibility working group over the years. Toby, you've been there a bunch. Beth Summerfield comes to pretty much every single meeting that we have. And pretty early on, at the beginning of our meetings, we usually have updates, and Beth frequently will have things to say and update us about things that are happening with accessibility and ADA Title II stuff. So I think we really rely on campus leadership from that. And then I would also just want to give a big shout out to Amy Kogenauer in the Orbis Cascade Alliance. The Orbis Cascade Alliance, that's kind of a consortium of libraries that we're a part of. And through the Orbis Cascade Alliance, they have so many webinars and programs and workshops and just I don't really know how Amy Kogenauer does it all and organizes it all, but to me it's just been a constant stream of resources, but also community. There's a lot of this is all great, but there's a lot of stress around this too. Like, how can these deadlines be met, and how can this work be done? And I think a lot of that can be answered just through like the campus-wide ADA initiative and through the Orbis Cascade Alliance. And like Hannah said, through the, I think it's exciting that the football team is in the Big Ten, but it's like, it's almost to me more exciting that the library is in the Big Ten. Like it is, and there's no rivalry there. Like I love the Ohio State University and Michigan. It is really, really exciting to come to learn from Michigan and all this, or Michigan State. So thank goodness for the Big Ten.
There is such incredible resources that we are getting from our peers in the Big Ten. And just also, I really going back to this collective responsibility that Kimanthi was highlighting, and access as a shared responsibility is something that Bree and myself in the ADA office always promotes as well too, of we're all in this together. And in that line as well too, I kind of want to highlight some resources that you guys already have in place that could honestly support maybe faculty or instructional staff in creating and procuring and gathering accessible materials that are already existing. So I'm curious to see if there's any resources that you guys would like to highlight, any resources that might be on the internet or at the libraries itself that could help with folks complying with this rule and just ensuring that their content is digitally accessible.
Yeah, sure. So the library subscribe to so many resources. Just looking at this page called the A to Z databases list has 706 databases on it. So these are everything from like A to R music anthology for people researching music to the law library collection, just all kinds of different things. A researcher will go in here, do some searches, pull up articles that might pertain to their research. So what we want is make that process accessible. We don't want any of these databases to provide a barrier for someone who's trying to do research. Maybe they are using a screen reader or they can't use their keyboard. We want them to be able to do their research. So this takes some of the work away from professors or assigning readings because we want it to be born accessible so that people don't have to worry about it when they're assigning for their classes. Of course, these are all third parties, vendors. I don't have the power to do any coding on their websites. So really what we have to do is go through and I do, me and my team, we do a little bit of testing, accessibility testing. We also look at each vendor's VPAT, which we referred to earlier in the podcast, but it's a document that kind of outlines their accessibility details. And I do some kind of grading of that. Our licensing librarian does some contract language to say, like, hey, if this isn't an accessible resource, you gotta, make some changes in the future. It's a multi-step process, but in the end, we try to have all these in order to procure or renew this resource. So the goal, especially by the ADA deadline here, is to have all of our resources accessible. And it's actually going really well. We've been working on this project, since I started 2018. So it's been a process. And more resources are accessible each year. We do a little audit and track the numbers, and it's definitely improving over time. And especially with the ADA Title II deadline, the vendors are starting to take us more seriously as well, which is great. We had the Washington State policy, but it's a little too local to get vendors' attention sometimes. So in that sense, I've really been happy to have this kind of law behind us to provide some bite to what we're asking from these vendors. So yeah, I'm really happy about the work we've been doing, the support we've had.
Thank you for all the work that you've been doing there and the resource that this is today, as well as going to become with this timeline in the next year as well too. But that was the slate of questions that we had for you guys today. I do want to open the floor and see, are there any things that you would like to highlight in terms of resources or anything about accessibility in the libraries that we haven't covered today that you would love to plug? Because we do want to highlight and give you all the kudos for the great work that you have been doing over the past year in terms of the Title II, but also in just the history of the Accessibility Working Group and the history of the libraries and how you guys are really fulfilling the university's mission.
This is Elliot. What I would plug is really just any unit that you're in or department that you're in. I really recommend starting an accessibility working group. And at least for us, those buckets have helped. Like invite a speaker, invite someone to your group who is an accessibility expert or who is involved in accessibility, who is committed to it, who does work in it, and just listen, hear what they have to say. So I think inviting speakers. And then I think we really love our community of practice model where we're doing the work. Let's get feedback about it. Let's get some reflection on it. And so anyone who's doing accessibility work, and this could be some detailed big project with a big budget, or it could be something very small, very humble. Maybe the whole project is just getting people to put alt text, alternative text, into their slides. And so maybe somebody just wants to workshop that. Like, how do we get our unit? How do I get our department so that everybody, whenever they're making a slideshow, they're putting alternative text in all their images? And then I think the other thing is sometimes the work seems so big, you kind of need subcommittees to put it into little bites, to find projects, and let's get a subcommittee on the project. And so maybe you want a subcommittee for auditing, or a subcommittee for procurement, or a subcommittee for teaching and learning, or a subcommittee for your staff. Accessibility is not just the users of things, it's the administrators, it's the workers. Accessibility is for all of us. So I think those are some takeaways that I have of just, it's great to have an accessibility working group.
I guess the one thing that I would add to that, as folks are navigating preparation for our Department of Justice deadline, is something that I think has been really helpful in our conversations with the task force, is really talking about that inventory review and that risk assessment and being able to identify priorities. This could sometimes feel like a very big task. There's so many different ways that we connect to accessibility and digital accessibility. And so being able to take the time to look at all of the work from a perspective of impact and being able to triage your what's most important versus things that you would like to do could really help folks make it feel more tangible in the work that they're doing. And so that's something that I would add to a recommendation for folks that are leaning into this work.
Yeah. Toby, as we close this out, that speaks to this idea that we've always talked about in the EDA office, that accessibility is a journey and not a destination. As long as we have a plan and we're working towards the plan and re-looking at how that fits into priorities, like that's the core of this work, because it's, again, there's no final destination here. We're on a journey that will continue to evolve. So many kudos and thanks to you all and the work that you have done historically and are doing at present and will continue in the future. You really are a great model of a unit thinking about this holistically and operationally.
I couldn't agree more with how incredible of a model you guys are for the university and all the work that you have put in for this role and everything before it. I want to say thank you all for being here and closing out our season with us. I don't think Bree and I could ask for a better group of folks to really close out the season that was really surrounding digital access and accessibility as a whole at the university. So Elliot, Kimanthi, Hana, thank you all so much for being here, and thank you so much for all the work that you do.
Well, thank you, Toby. Thank you, Bree.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.